Yeah, sorry, my audio wasn't working. I'm back.
Okay. So, Reese, I'm going to make you host.
Cool.
Okay. So it's all over to you. I've made you host. So I'm going to leave. So it's absolutely fine if I leave the session. Eh?
Yeah, it should be.
Should
Just
be.
tell me when I need to go, hey?
Yeah. So what we'll do is, Reese, you've got all the panel, you've got the controls now. So we are recording, and then you will make the session live at 3 o'clock. And then Nicola, what I would do is I would just stay off for about 30 seconds. Let that session will commence shortly, because there's a slight delay between what we're doing here and the platform ourselves that we're working on. So just let the session will commence shortly. Just stay on for about 35 to 40 seconds, and then you can start.
Okay, cool.
Okay, Reese, are you clear with that, Pat? So you've got the controls now. You're going to make the session live, eh?
At 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Cool. Thanks, Neil.
Cool, guys. And Nicola, have fun. Enjoy.
Thank you.
When are you going to put your screen on? I want to see what T-shirt you're wearing today.
For me, I've got my screen. Oh, my video. Oh, shucks.
Ah.
Yeah, you need to see my face, hey?
No, where's Bart, man?
You know, but just for the last time. Today, I'm dystopian.
Oh, that's absolutely cool. Okay, guys, thanks. Hey?
Are they going to tell people that this is live?
Nicola, what you can do is maybe when you do start, just say thank you so much for joining this live session with us.
Cool.
Okay, and then we should be good. And then Reese, when we finished, just remember to stop the session for all, eh?
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay, and then it will stop automatically on our side. So we have got a good 7 minutes to go. So get yourselves all comfortable, and I'll chat to you now. I'm going to switch my camera off. There we go. And I'm going to stay on just until we live, and then I wonder if I can leave. So Nicola, just a quick one. We sent those mails this morning, hey?
Yes, I saw them.
Yeah, so everything cool. That wasn't hectic. We just try to not make it the most important thing of the mailers.
Yeah.
But at least it's done, and we said what we would do for them. So I think we're okay, Nicola.
Yeah, I mean, it's just about taking accountability. Yeah, we live and we learn.
No, 100%.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Cool. But thanks for all your efforts. I know you worked hard last night.
Yeah, I mean, I was upset with my junior, but she pulled herself together, and you know, it's part of the job, training as well.
Yes, 100%.
So learning from mistakes.
Okay. We have got a few minutes. And we just hope this works.
Oh my God, don't say that.
We got to have let's just, we've been positive. It's going to be perfect. It's going to be the best session that we've had the whole of All Fashion Sourcing, right?
Well, I mean, if a meteor hits me, thanks guys. In that kind of year.
Yeah.
It's been crazy.
Yeah, it's been, wow.
And how's it going so far?
Yeah, no, it's been good. The engagement on the platform's been great, and nice numbers to the sessions. So we actually quite comfortable, and it's going to be up for a few months after this. So the content's still going to be accessed after this, which is important
cool.
for us. And then we can still drive people back to certain pieces of content, you know. And
yeah.
Yeah, so for us, it's good. We're quite comfortable where we are. The platform's been an interesting one. I think there's always one or two things at the start with the platform, just technical issues with some of the exhibitors, especially with them, a lot of them being in China. But we've overcome that, and the teams work flipping hard just to get this over the line. But yeah, it's been a massive learning curve for all of us.
Yeah. It's a crazy time. I think we underestimate the impact of it on us, you know, from our day-to-day roles. People are just overwhelmed.
And then Reese, just a quick one. You must just give me access to that at about 20 past, okay? To the other link.
I'll do that.
Okay, thanks, bud. Thank you. Okay, 2 minutes. Reese, you're going to join me at 4 o'clock, eh? On the other one, eh?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I will be joining that one as soon as this one finishes.
Yeah, that's why if we can finish at about 10 to at the latest, that would be ideal.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
You good for time there? Can I start?
Okay, yeah, when you guys, what's the time, guys? Okay, so yeah, Reese, I'm going to hand over to you. You can make it live when you're ready. And then Nicola, just remember, just keep that one screen on just while everybody joins, and then start about 45 seconds later. Okay.
Will you let me know when you go live?
Yeah.
Reese, over to you. I'm gonna depart. Good luck, Nicola.
Thanks.
Thanks, Neil. Okay, I'm going to start the webinar now in about 10 seconds. So then just give it about 40 and you can take it away.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicola. Good luck.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this live webinar with myself, Nicola Cooper. I am a trend analyst and cultural strategist based in Cape Town, South Africa, and it is my honor and pleasure to join you here today via the virtual world. Today we will be presenting you some of our menswear trends that my team and I have put together, and I think just as an introduction to this particular report is that we were looking at what is currently happening from a global perspective and the impact that that is having on us as human beings. And we started to sort of identify relative patterns that in personas that we could actually see articulating and manifesting in front of us. So what we decided to do is look at these kinds of sudden shifts and what they've done to our every person and to our consumers and to our sort of industry and what that means for the fashion industry at large. So one of the really, really prime aspects of this is that this shift of values from our consumer and what has happened as a result of COVID is that we are being reminded of a really, really valuable ingredient of culture. And I dare say one that we've forgotten, which is humanity. So what we're starting to see is human behaviors are changing. Our consumers, ourselves, our peers are overwhelmed. And I think that when we look at the tremendous amount of sort of shifting and shuffling that we have seen as a result of one, the cultural shifts and protest movements, as well as COVID and the current political climate, that there's really important indicators that will likely only exist as a result of COVID. And then there are certain trends that will live beyond COVID. And I mean, we've heard it in the press being referred to as the new norm, but I think it's a lot deeper than that. I think there's a fundamental shift that's happening within humanity that if we are not aware of, we are not going to be able to keep up with our consumers. So I think what we're starting to see is not only in terms of manufacturing, but in terms of retailing spaces, who sits on your board, how you impact the environment around you. All of these facets are really, really important. And I think this title in terms of Are We Even Here is the idea of like, are we actually thinking about whether we can, where we are? I think a lot of us are sort of stopping for a moment and going, gosh, like, what am I doing here? I've forgotten this, because it's no longer just popping out to the store. It's the hand sanitizer, the mask, everything. And we feel like we're being sort of armored to deal with the daily. It's really important to note the tremendous sort of effect this will have on consumers. But primary to this is digital acceleration. As you know, even in the most sort of frigid spaces where people are less trusting of digital platforms and digital spaces, they have been enforced to utilize these spaces. And I say that presenting from a little corner of my home where I have been for the past 7 months. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that your consumers have been forced into this new space, and now that you've got them, what do you do with them? And what does that mean to your business? What does that mean to your retail? What does that mean to your manufacturing? Now with this hyper connected consumer. So, like I said earlier, a lot of these behaviors have existed before COVID, and some of them have been fast-tracked as a result of COVID, but many of these will have long-term implications. I think we're starting to see the sort of ripple effects of loss of income and insecurities, and these kinds of things are really important to sort of understand when you are developing products and starting to position at either a consumer that's buying down into a more affordable retail space, or someone that might be buying up in terms of buying luxury products in order for them to last longer and ensure durability. So I think there's a lot of sort of nuances around product development and what it is our consumers need. So our first trend we have entitled highly functioning. We all know this person. This person, in terms of COVID, was the guy that was working out, managing everything and doing his work, and as well as like doing those Virgin Active, those gym memberships, all those things in his living room with his dumbbells, but also the fact that there was this incessant craving for outdoors. And that is obviously as a result of us being enclosed. But as I said earlier, this is not a new trend. The sort of outdoor clothing market, the functional clothing market has been growing tremendously. And we've seen the shift even in the streetwear spaces, where outdoor wear has now become almost an extension of streetwear. And we look at the sort of rise or the new shifting of brands such as North Face and what that means to the outdoor market. And I think it's really important to understand that the desirability that we have created as a result of being confined to spaces, this new sort of explorer and someone that just wants to engage with a world that we were previously ignoring. So what this does is that the adaptability of utilitarian highlights is really, really important. Now that you're seeing your consumers shifting and changing and making multi-functional spaces, their garments have to be equally so. And it really is about the idea of form and function, as well as significant lifestyle choices. So it's really important to understand, as diverse as your consumer is, and as sort of shifting as he is, it's almost a little bit like a Rubik's Cube that we have to constantly shift with this sort of ever shifting space. So it's a constant thing that we as trend analysts are sort of quickly trying to sort of manifest what is actually happening and how do we best support our industries. So obviously this is really brought about by consumer sentiment, and it's a push towards increased durability and convenience where they purchase. But it is also the sort of the application of durable clothing that is of peak interest to our consumers. So the idea of durability, when we speak about adaptability and durability, we also speak about sustainability. And this is a really key point that many of us really don't sort of perceive. It's if we are building businesses for sustainability, which means our consumers are purchasing less and less frequently, what do we do as businesses to expand our product offering in order to ensure that we have the sustainable income coming in? So I think that it's a really fine space that we're entering in terms of, you know, where we're going in 2021, but where we're going in 2025 and where we're going in 2030, and how we're doing those subtle shifts so that we are prepared for this dynamic, because it is inevitable. So around high functionality, obviously with what we've been seeing on many streets around the globe is the protest sort of, I would say aesthetic, but it would be completely incorrect. But the ideas of this kind of references to deconstructivism, this kind of post-apocalyptic sort of zeitgeist, which is being nuanced by pop culture trends such as Drive or a Blade Runner or Dune, and how this is sort of impacting this kind of gritty thing in fashion that I, for one, am excited to see. I think we've seen the polished for quite a long time. And as we know, with the strong sort of pendulum swing to the other side, we're seeing the grit and split. And there's something quite exciting about that. So this also translates into, you know, the inclusion of elements such as drawstrings, crossbody bags, straps, pockets, utility elements, all those kinds of facets. But I think texturally so, smart fabrications, these kinds of nuances that have the durability of reflector to sort of protect from day to night, all these facets are something we have to take into consideration on the manufacturing front. So this is Reese Cooper, and just a little snapshot of his collection. It's about, you know, these kinds of core fashion items and a nod to the natural space. And I think, you know, this is something that we continuously say. We're very, very hyper aware of us and our impact that it has had on the sort of footprints and carbon footprints. And now our consumers are really seeing, with the help of COVID, what our true impact is. And I think that that's shifting a lot of consumers into this new space, not only in terms of manufacturing, but also in terms of aesthetic. It's almost sort of a badge of honor per se, if we are wearing something that is good for the environment. We often refer to it as like bragging items. You know, you don't know what this is, this belongs here. These are important narratives that will continue beyond, you know, any campaign or any advertising. So the Oasi Zenga, this is an outdoor inspiration, and this is also, it's by Z Zenga, and it's a 2021 spring summer. And I think there's a lovely nuance of all these kinds of facets. You know, there's these delicate prints that come through, but also these sort of bold, bright, outdoor, protective, sort of ripstop spaces that we, you know, we are starting to see this kind of layering aspect, which is really, really valuable. This is Tokyo James, another African designer, and how we can see these kinds of combinations of unique fabrications such as leather, vinyl, sequins, meshes. And it's almost, you know, when you passing through a very, very busy city and you see the layers of posters and advertising that have been ripped and sort of textured along the way to create these underfolds with these sort of viewpoints of what was there before and what is there now, and almost the anticipation of what is going to be in the future. So there's a beautiful sort of a really sort of throwback, dirty sort of poster, and as I said, this sort of post-apocalyptic space that that we're consciously aware of. I don't think there's anything that we haven't. I mean, there's been meteors, wasps, you name it. We're sort of going, goodness, what are we in for? And this is directly impacting sort of through the line in terms of your consumer psyche, but also down to how our designers are expressing this from a creative perspective. The next trend we speak to is we've aptly named It's Complicated. We know what it's like. We ourselves are overwhelmed. Our consumers are overwhelmed. And we often, when we speak to retailers, we speak about the importance of saving your consumer time or saving them from doing that kind of admin. We've got so much noise going on constantly. We're bombarded with information, and just today, as the sort of American voting is happening, it sits here in the back of our head continuously of what's going to happen, how it's going to impact us, what does this mean for the rand dollar, what does this mean? And I think this particular form of clothing really speaks to that sort of, I guess, almost in terms of a tasting menu, it's a complete palate cleanser, where it is around just clean, uncluttered, non-fussy, and the idea of just being able to breathe for just one moment. And I think this is a really important trend, especially when you are sort of tapping into these beautiful sort of new fabrications and natural fabrications that you can beautifully articulate around the sort of austerity and removal and sort of less is more concept. So this video I'm just going to play through, and I'll speak to it after the fact. So just picking up on that, this is Jill Sanders Spring Summit 2021, and we're seeing the immersion of cotton tools and these beautiful neutrals and navy accented powder blue, but really it's the stripped down bare minimum. And really, when I was speaking to the idea of purchasing that one thing, and because of the quality, because of the shape, because of the sort of longevity, these are key designs that really stand out in amidst all the, it really does cut through the noise. Sorry, I'm just being told that my computer sound is off, so unfortunately I'm not sure why that is, but I will ensure that we have this available in terms of a link so that you guys can view it in your own time. Welcome to the technological world from my humble home. So this is Thabo Koppel, and this is again a translation. His collection, the Duxbury collection, is really again that sort of just pulling back this classic simple silhouettes, crisp creams balanced with strong navies, with textured accessories. It really is, the capsule collection of a minimalist dream. I think the items are interchangeable and interwoven, and there's a layering that can happen. And as you know, with a sort of a throw to the Asian designers, the Yohji Yamamoto's, it's that layering that gives us the sense of protection and the sense of utility and functionality. And that's really important when we're looking at our consumers, is that kind of when the buying argument happens, is how's this going to fit into my life now that I'm decluttering my spaces. Again, this is a South African designer, Lukhanya Mdingi. His collection Relic, which again, completely pared back, but what we're seeing, the focus is these incredible suiting. jersey, mohair, these deep, rich brown tones, this sort of strong trench coat, which we are seeing as a trend from a global perspective, but how it's nuanced with the linings and the detailing. And I think this is such an important thing, is that when we are sort of overwhelmed with information, we tend to miss the details. And I think this is just that idea of pressing pause. And I think that's something that we've all learned how to do, is in amongst this chaos, is hit that button, stop for a moment, breathe, and figure out how we're going to adjust ourselves. This is DNA by Neil Barrett. Again, you're seeing strong color blocking, but cotton tools, jersey, linen, fleece, really just pulled back. Again, these very, very strong neutral tones, as well as bucket hats and those kinds of accessories, which we know sort of translate, with this kind of multifunctionality and just classic simplicity, which I feel has been missing for a while now. The next one is a key trend of mine. It's something that I really, really love watching. And it is brought on by the fact of something which we refer to as the nostalgia pendulum, which is a rolling 30-year cycle or pop culture cycle. So what that means is that it takes, according to Patrick Menswear, who coined the phrase, it takes about 30 years for a critical mass of people who were consumers of culture when they were young to become their own creators of culture in their adulthood. And I know that sounds like a little bit of a tongue twister, but what that means is now myself in my 40s, as someone that generates content and is a contributor to culture, is inevitably selling my own youth culture back to myself. And this is why some of us that are in our 30s and in our 40s are seeing our childhood being replayed back to us. So there are these kinds of familiarities that are coming, whether it be the prequels of the Karate Kid or that weekend sound that has that 80s synth. It's back, and it's something that we immediately feel nostalgia towards. It's this idea of memory, and this is really important during this time. The idea of, in amidst this chaos, something that makes us feel good and reminds us of being a kid and reminds us of all those elements that we enjoyed in our childhood. And I think that's a really important part when we're looking specifically at African trends. The idea that when we speak of South African Black fashion, there is no real nostalgia. It hasn't really been documented. And it's something that, now our designers that are creating for the present will create that in 30 years' time, that revisit to something that didn't previously exist. So this is where designers such as Rich Mnisi come into play. His collection was really, was in memory to his mom and woman, and how it's just, how it's driven by his own current memory, but also the development as a young African designer for a future memory. And I know it sounds a little paradoxical, but when you look at the African fashion space and the idea that, previously in terms of documentation or historical documentation, there wasn't something that we could refer to in terms of our history of fashion, our history of African fashion. And I think that now what we're starting to see with current African designers and creators is that we are creating something now that will live beyond our kind of existence and will leave a legacy beyond our lifespan. So again, I'm just going to show you this without sound, but this video by Richard Mnisi was shot in the Transkei, which has a very special place in my heart. It's where I grew up. And unfortunately, it is without sound, but it isn't without beautiful visuals. So similarly, Per Goodson created a capsule collection entitled For Lily, again playing with the idea of memory, and this was created as an homage to his grandmother who passed away during lockdown. So again, the idea of this impact of COVID and what this means and how this memory and those of us who have lived through this have this very, very, very distinct historical catalyst that will forever live in history. But it's not just the major macro perspective of what it's doing from a global, it's also what is happening on an intimate perspective. And for those people who have lost loved ones during this time. So I think it was really quite moving for this particular collection, the idea of how our memories shape the world and how this exists as a creation of what was past. And I think it's a really interesting space as designers, specifically when we're looking at the kind of fabrication that is used in this collection. It's laces, it's silks, it's fine knits, it's loose tops, it's loose denim shirts, and all this kind of combination and sort of collage of different textures, almost like a borrowing that happens. And I think this is something that we're going to see in terms of sustainability, is this sort of patchwork merging of different fabrications and anti-waste items creating from compartments creating a whole. So I think it's going to be a really interesting space to see as it unfolds. Then again, the Dior Spring Summer 2021 collection, which was a collaboration between Dior and Ghanaian artist Biafo. Many of the graphics which were used through the collection are of his works, which linked to his personal memories. However, together with Dior, these memories are given an additional platform to be absorbed. So it's quite interesting, the dynamic of this luxury fashion house and a Ghanaian artist coming together to create something and somewhat of a synergy, sitting right deadpan in the center of this kind of merging. And I think, you know, when we look at it, it's graphic, it's mesh, it's all these kinds of luxurious fabrications, but it has the core, I dare say naivete, but I don't think that's the word, but I think it's this kind of distinctly African aesthetic that is then applied in terms of luxury. And that's kind of these meeting of worlds that we are starting to see more so as we see Africa collaborating with the rest of the world. And it is through this kind of merging that we are seeing really incredible things happening and incredible sort of opportunities for us to sort of play with. The next trend we're going to go into is around the idea of optimism. I think, you know, what we're starting to see, and specifically as someone that works in the FMCG space, as well as, you know, in terms of fashion and lifestyle, lifestyle extends beyond wellness in terms of keeping fit and eating well, the correct kinds of foods, and how that's impacting just from an overarching consumption perspective, is that our everyday routines were completely and utterly disrupted. And I know that we've spoken about disruption pre-2020, but when we speak about disruption pre-2020, it's definitely not the disruption of 2020. If we're going to speak about disruption, we're going to speak about 2020 for years to come. So what we're starting to see is the impact of the financial stresses, the income loss, the health concerns, which have driven consumers to seek a new sense of kind of normalcy and a reason to laugh. And that tiny silver lining. And I think the name of this trend was really coined by my team, who had been observing, our stats and sort of what is impacting our consumers here in South Africa from all facets, from a affordable retail space to even a basket size that someone can afford and what they can eat at this precise moment. And when we spoke to our clients, one of the things we realized is that our consumers need a little bit of hope and they need a little bit of optimism. And how do we utilize this necessity to bring them something that will make them feel better, whether it is the value that they place on a garment or how the garment is manufactured, how it makes them feel, and what does it align to, and does it align to your consumers' bigger picture of hope, and bigger picture of how they're going to navigate this space for the next few years as we see the ripple effect forward into the next sort of 5 years, and how we're going to recoup both as a country in South Africa, but as well as globally. So, as I said, this is beyond food intake or exercise, and it's around specifically consumers' purchasing priorities. I think more and more of our consumers are and wanting to know what it is I'm buying and why I'm buying it and the story behind the fact. And I think that's the idea in the retail spaces of if we build it, they will come. If the product is there, our consumers will just buy. And I think it's way beyond that. And I think we have to shake up those nuances and infrastructures when we're looking at something that is, fashion, that is a prime extension of personal expression. So what that means is that consumers, this means more to them than just how it looks from an aesthetic perspective. Whether we're looking at a consumer that can afford luxury, sustainable items, and what that narrative is to them and what that means to them, but then also the consumer that is just getting by, and what that means to them, and what their priorities are of a consumer. And many of those who know my work understand the idea, especially in spaces like South Africa, where there is a strong sort of economic divide, is that there is an understanding of the democratization of fashion, and the idea that even though it is an affordable retail space, our consumers' money is still of value, and they still deserve the respect that any other consumer does. And I think that's a really prime thing, especially now when we're looking at brands, we're looking at retails, and we know that times are tough for a lot of people globally. What that extension of monetary exchange takes for our consumer to get there. And I think this is really around the humanization of COVID. There's so many stats and facts and sort of information that's consistently being thrown at us that we have to, again, like I said, is stop, pause, and have a breath for a moment and remember that we are dealing with people, and we're dealing with, in essence, their identity and their lost identity at present. Again, just playing without sound, roll with me, guys. But you can see the subtle nuances and the homage that we are playing towards encouraging a natural space. It's a really interesting space to start looking at, you know, really how our world is changing and how the outside is being integrated to the inside, with obviously plant trends and all of those kinds of things that we've been seeing for a long time. But what we really understand more so than anything else is those trends that existed previously to COVID now are further enforced by COVID. And this idea of, you know, this necessity for something that is positive, that is optimistic. So just a sort of touch base on this particular slide. This Nigerian heritage by Aluluwaya, Liberation. And that is, I mean, when we see this kind of collage element, which I was speaking to earlier, this kind of patchworking of different items that could have potentially been waste, and how it's conformed into these beautiful block shapes, and how we can pull inspiration even from the aesthetics. I think this particular collection really shows ingenuity around young designers and the idea of upcycled elements that speak to brands' desires to be sustainable. But I think what's really important around this as well, from the African continent perspective, as you know, we often as a continent are given waste items from other countries, and it's something that is an innate part of African culture, specifically in spaces like South Africa, where thrifting and you know, going and actively seeking out things and repurposing those items and shifting them and making them uniquely ours as Africans. I think it's a really interesting space. This is something that we refer to as hyper sampling in the fashion space. It's this idea of, you know, you take a little bit of this and you pull a little bit of that and you mix it with a little bit of this and you twist it together and you mash it together and you apply it to become something that is completely unique. And I think this, the liberation facet, is not only is it speaking about this particular collection around promoting Black liberation, but it's also the idea of the ingenuity of young African designers. And I often speak about, you know, Africa, our not having in Africa has really created such an interesting space around how I think great creativity comes from adversity. It's the not having. And I think that's where Africa has got this, just this sort of gold nuggets of how we take things and how we manufacture things and how we create things almost out of nothing. And I think that that's something that we as an African continent and designers on the African continent have to offer the rest of the world. It's this idea of you don't have to have more. The idea of in some cases on the African continent, countries are in extreme poverty, but that doesn't mean that creativity doesn't happen. So similarly to that, and one of my favorites at the moment is the Simon & Mary Cactus Leather collection, what I love about this collection is Simon and Mary is very, very well known headgear brand in South Africa, and has played around in the space in terms of felt and classic sort of nostalgic manufacturing. I think the factory itself is now into 4th generation family members, and it's the newest generation, Dean Posniak, whose brainchild is Simon and Mary. And what I love about this is that this is old school millinery. This is fourth generation millinery, but utilizing cactus leather, and equally so shot by Jana and Koos during lockdown where no models were available. So the idea around this is, you know, these items, the bucket cap, these kinds of really, really earthy tones, this weatherproofing aspect, which also lends into, you know, the adaptability and flexibility of clothing, but just the almost tongue-in-cheek aspect in which it has been done. And again, it's this kind of hybridization of the old and the new, the natural, and how you're shifting the synthetic. So it's a really interesting facet here, shot in the middle of South Africa during lockdown in a desert landscape. And I think that's, you know, these kinds of nuances when we look at what our makers and creators and designers offer to the world. It's this really almost unabashed humor, and that's something that we really, really wanted to articulate in this presentation. We started off with the very deep, dark stuff, the dystopian sort of nightmare, these kinds of scary spaces, and we really wanted to end with you on a really positive note, and with something that would make you smile. Again, also that sort of filtering into another South African brand called Throwaway 20, where their collection, which referenced pride, spoke to the optimism around equality for all. This is very, very illustrative of what is not only happening from a global perspective, but also on the continent, the idea of fighting for the LGBTQ++, and what that means in terms of environments in the African continent, and what that means in some cases, and sometimes it is to the extremities. And as young, gay, and lesbian and bisexual and how do we fit in this space, and how do we fit as Africans in this space where there is in some cases great religious adversity, sociological adversity, and what that means to our consumers while they sort of unfold their own identities. So this particular collection, you know, if you ever have the opportunity to view a Throwaway 20 show, is completely optimistic. This brand itself is really a package of glitter that explodes in front of your face. And this particular collection was items that sort of ran the runway of each color of the rainbow, and comprised of 15 looks, each with specific nuance and sort of nod to the rainbow flag. So I think it's how these can really play and intertwine with one another, and how just in terms of sort of color selection and what that can mean in color combinations, and what that means when it is applied with optimism and sort of this hopefulness and almost childlike quality that brands like Throwaway 20 come to us with. So I mean, these are just key items, you know, the key items that we've been seeing globally, but played with a nuance that just plays in the space. And when we look at it as an African brand, we really love the way that these kinds of colors just pop on skin tones, and the diversity of each color allows for the wearing of diversity as well. So it's a really complex, layered collection that is inevitably just a ball of fun. And so again, we have to look at Comme des Garçons. I think this is really that kind of mishmash and merging of kind of what we were seeing in the beginning of this particular report, and how we're seeing the humor and the eccentricities of Comme des Garçons coming through in this latest collection. So from the show notes, Reika Kubo said, "It is my wish that the strength of metal, the strength that wouldn't yield to any pressure or force, and the strength that will give birth to hope that we need to overcome the various hardships we now face, we will all overlap in this collection." So again, even, you know, brands such as Comme des Garçons, it's the idea of presenting some sense of hope, and how you can do that and play around with the nuances. And in some cases, when I've looked at our entire report, my overarching sort of observation is that there's this kind of futuristic nostalgia, sort of I think it's kind of when you see two magnets that are sort of bouncing off of one another and creating some kind of momentum, is what we're seeing is like this desirability for a simpler time, a sort of non-cluttered, non-chaos time, but simultaneously having to consume astronomical amounts of information and adjusting in lifestyles that at the end of the day, we just want some sense of peace, some sense of hope, some sense of optimism, and some sense of humor. So also looking at how this is translating, and how this kind of softness has resulted in these nuances on tone. So it's not just the idea of placing, you know, collections and merging it as a sort of patchwork collection of misused fabrics, but in the same way, similarly, it is done with color. So these ideas of, you know, this mono color blocking out of the same sort of tints and tones of one particular color, and how we're seeing how that in itself creates the idea of a full look, but also one that can work separately, therefore sort of driving the ideas of this free but guarded, multi-useful but one use, and these kinds of parallels that we're starting to see as a result of these cultural shifts and these socioeconomic shifts, political shifts, and what that means. So it's a really interesting space. So when I go back to this particular point, you will see how the layering aspect and this memory aspect, which I spoke to earlier with the works of designers such as Rich and Nisi, is that every bit and component of this has some sort of narrative. And I think that in this way, and I know it's probably a little bit too deep, but the idea of playing with wastage, the idea of playing with patchworks, but also the idea of playing with memory and playing with the future simultaneously, is really what I see as young designers being left in a room full of things and creating. And I think that's really what lockdown and what COVID and what this sort of year has entailed, is that we've been forced into this space and into uncomfortable spaces that with people that sometimes we don't like, and we are forced to make things happen. We are forced to create work, and we're forced to make things happen and make sure that all the bills are paid and those kinds of things. And I think we can all sort of pick a little bit of a sort of, I guess, legacy in this kind of liberation and this kind of optimism that, you know, we just got to roll with the punches and enjoy what we are going through now, and just take it one day at a time. So similarly, the Orange Culture collection from spring summer 2021, and it was really created as a result of being an outcast. And again, it's playing around with contrasting elements and highlighting the facets and challenges that can be faced by people who are obscured by society. So when we look at this from a more conceptual and theoretical space, it's about those unsung heroes. It's about our everyday struggles. It's about people who are struggling with depression. The idea that burnout is now a legitimate term with the Health World Organization. It is now a legitimate illness. And that is as a result of us pushing so tremendously hard and having to adapt quickly as we are adapting to technological changes, climate changes, economic changes, and wasps. And I think that this is just, you know, testimony to the chaos that has been this year, and how somehow great work from sort of runway shows that have included marionettes to cactus photo shoots to models shooting themselves for magazines, and how life isn't actually as bad as it seems, and that somehow there is an opportunity and there is a potential prospect, no matter how bleak it may seem. So with that said, I hope I leave you on the most positive note, and that in amongst all this chaos, we brought you, or my team and I at Nicola Cooper Associates, brought you a reason to smile, a reason to be optimistic, and if anything, to know that we are making, irrespectively, young designers on the continent and globally are making, and I think it's going to be an exciting time ahead. I just wanted to thank All Fashion Sourcing for allowing me the privilege of this platform again. I want to thank everyone that allowed us into their spaces today, and the tech team that now has allowed us to exist in the digital space. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed it.